Blood Hill. The name itself is a stain on the local maps, a whisper of old dread. It looms over the unsuspecting village of Oakhaven, a brooding sentinel wrapped in perpetual twilight. Few souls brave its winding paths after dusk. Fewer still speak openly of what they believe resides there amidst the gnarled trees and crumbling stones. The wind, a constant mourner, sighs through its skeletal branches. It carries fragments of sorrow, echoes of unspeakable violence. And it carries his name, Azazel. The very air on Blood Hill feels different, palpably colder, imbued with a suffocating heaviness. A sense of profound dread clings to the ancient earth, a chill that settles deep within the bones of any who dare to tread its cursed ground. This place remembers everything. The legends are manifold. They speak of shadows that dance where no living thing casts them. They tell of whispers on the breeze that sound like tortured pleas, or perhaps something far more sinister. For generations, mothers in Oakhaven have used the name of Blood Hill to hush unruly children. They speak of a darkness that seeped into the soil, a malevolence that took root and festered. At the heart of these chilling tales stands one figure, a man, or what was once a man, Azazel Gary Ridgway. His story is inextricably woven into the very fabric of Blood Hill's terror, a chronicle of a life steeped in malice, culminating in a legacy of fear that refuses to fade with the passing years. His name is rarely uttered above a breath, Azazel. Even now, decades after his reign of terror supposedly ended, the sound of it can conjure a shiver. He was not merely a criminal. He became something more, something other, a local bogeyman, a tangible manifestation of the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. His deeds were a brutal scar upon the community, a wound that never truly healed. The stories paint him as a creature of immense cruelty, his capacity for violence seemingly boundless. He transformed from a troubled boy into a monster, his path a descent into an abyss from which there was no return. Blood Hill was his stage, his hunting ground, and ultimately his unhallowed grave. The locals say he knew its every secret, every hidden hollow, every treacherous incline. He moved through its shadows like a phantom, a predator perfectly attuned to his domain. The hill, in turn, seems to have absorbed his essence, becoming a monument to his twisted existence. The terror he inspired in life did not die with him. Instead, it mutated, transforming into the chilling hauntings that now define Blood Hill. His dark legacy is not just a memory, it is an active, malevolent presence, felt by all who approach that forsaken place. The darkness that defined Azazel Gary Ridgway was not born in a vacuum. It was nurtured in the fertile soil of a fractured childhood. His early years were a tapestry of neglect and subtle cruelties, woven within the claustrophobic confines of a home devoid of warmth. His mother, Martha, was a woman of stern, unyielding temperament. Her affections were meager, her criticisms plentiful. She saw in young Azazel a reflection of her own disappointments, a stubborn defiance that she sought to crush rather than understand. His father, a spectral presence even when physically there, offered no solace, lost in his own quiet despair and the bottom of a bottle. In this bleak landscape, Azazel's spirit twisted. Small cruelties began to manifest. Insects pulled apart with meticulous care. Neighborhood pets vanished without a trace, their absences marked by a chilling silence from the Ridgway house. These were the early tremors, the first signs of a profound disturbance. While other children played games of innocence, Azazel's imagination veered towards the macabre, his solitary amusements holding a disquieting edge. He was a quiet child, unnervingly so. His silence was not one of peace, but of observation, of thoughts that would make a grown man recoil. His younger brother, Bruce, was a stark contrast. Bruce was the light to Azazel's encroaching shadow. Bruce. He possessed a gentleness that seemed almost an affront in that household. Where Azazel was withdrawn and sullen, Bruce was open, kind-hearted. He often bore the brunt of Azazel's nascent sadism, subtle torments that their parents either failed to see or chose to ignore. Perhaps Bruce sensed the growing abyss within his older brother. He tried in his boyish way to reach him, to offer a hand across the chasm, but Azazel was already drifting too far, drawn by currents of an altogether darker nature. The bond between them, instead of strengthening, became a fragile thread, strained by Azazel's increasingly erratic and unsettling behavior. The schoolyard offered no refuge. Azazel was an outcast, his peculiar intensity setting him apart. He found no camaraderie, only further isolation. This solitude seemed to fuel the darkness within him, allowing it to grow unchecked, unexamined. Teachers noted his disturbing artwork, his morbid fascinations, but in an era less attuned to such signals, these were often dismissed as mere eccentricities. The cracks in Azazel's psyche were widening into fissures, pathways for the monstrosity that was to come. His troubled childhood was not merely a sad story. It was the forging ground for a future terror, a crucible where innocence was systematically burned away, leaving only cold, hard malice. The disquieting tendencies of Azazel's youth did not mellow with age. They sharpened. They festered. The small, private cruelties of his childhood soon spilled outwards, seeking larger, more impactful expressions. His teenage years were marked by a string of petty offenses: vandalism, minor thefts, acts designed to disrupt, to unsettle. Each transgression was a test, a probing of boundaries, a taste of the power he felt he lacked in his own oppressive home. He found a grim satisfaction in the fear he could inspire, in the unease that spread in his wake. The authorities saw a troubled youth, a problem child. They did not yet see the predator taking shape. His brother Bruce watched this descent with a growing sense of dread and helplessness. Bruce, now a young man himself, was everything Azazel was not. He was responsible, respected, his moral compass firmly set. He attempted to intervene, to steer Azazel away from the precipice. His pleas, however, fell on deaf ears. Azazel met Bruce's concern with scorn, with a chilling amusement that spoke volumes of the gulf now separating them. The darkness in Azazel had found purchase, and it was consuming him from within, twisting his perceptions, fueling his resentments until they became an unquenchable fire. The petty crimes began to escalate. Reports of assaults started to surface in the areas Azazel frequented. Always shadowy, always hard to prove, yet the whispers followed him. He developed a cunning, an ability to evade direct culpability, to melt back into the anonymity of the town. He learned to wear a mask of normalcy, however ill-fitting, when necessary. But beneath it, the rage simmered, the hunger for control, for dominance, growing with each passing day. He was no longer just lashing out. He was experimenting, honing his skills, his methods becoming more calculated, more sinister. The local constabulary had their eye on him, of course. He was a known nuisance, a name that appeared with increasing frequency in their ledgers. But they underestimated the depth of his depravity, the sheer scale of the evil that was blossoming. He was a shadow they couldn't quite grasp, a threat that was always one step ahead. Azazel was learning to navigate the undercurrents of society, to exploit its vulnerabilities. His criminal apprenticeship was nearing its end. The stage was being set for a far more horrifying display of his capabilities, a reign of terror that would forever brand his name into the local consciousness. The transition from petty criminal to something far more terrifying was swift and brutal. Azazel's malevolence, once a simmering undercurrent, erupted. The Viridian River, a once picturesque waterway that snaked its way past Oakhaven and near the foot of Blood Hill, became a place of grim association. It was here, along its secluded banks and in the dense thickets that lined its course, that Azazel's true nature was fully unleashed. People started to disappear. First, those on the fringes of society, individuals whose absence might not be immediately noted. Their last known whereabouts often traced back to the shadowed paths near the Viridian. A palpable fear began to grip the community. It was a fear that had a name, even if spoken only in hushed, fearful tones: Azazel. Though concrete proof remained elusive for a time, his shadow loomed large over every unexplained disappearance, every whispered rumor of foul play. He moved with an almost preternatural skill, leaving behind little for investigators to grasp. The Viridian River, once a source of local pride, became a symbol of dread, its waters seeming to run darker, its mists appearing more ominous. The natural beauty of the area was corrupted by the stain of his suspected deeds. He seemed to revel in the terror he created. There were whispers of taunts, of near encounters where victims narrowly escaped, their descriptions painting a portrait of a cold, unfeeling predator. Azazel was no longer just a troubled soul. He was a hunter, and the people of Oakhaven and its surroundings were his prey. The local police force, stretched thin and unequipped for such a cunning adversary, struggled to connect the dots, to build a case that would stick. He was always one step ahead, a phantom flitting through the deepening twilight of their investigation, leaving only fear and speculation in his wake. Bruce Ridgway lived this period in a state of constant torment. The brother he once knew, however troubled, was gone, replaced by a monster bearing his name. The community's fear was a heavy burden, their unspoken accusations a constant reminder of his familial tie to the source of their misery. He wrestled with his conscience, with the loyalty he once felt versus the horrifying reality of Azazel's actions. The noble heart of Bruce ached for the victims, for the town he loved, now living under a pall of terror. He knew with a chilling certainty that this could not continue, that Azazel's reign had to end. Section 5. The hunted becomes the hunter. Azazel on the run. Eventually, the net began to tighten, a chance discovery, a near miss, a piece of evidence too damning to ignore. Azazel Gary Ridgway was formally accused, his name now publicly linked to the horrors that had plagued the Viridian River and the surrounding countryside. He was apprehended, a brief moment of collective relief washing over Oakhaven. But Azazel was not so easily caged. His cunning, honed over years of skirting the edges of the law, had not deserted him. He was a creature of shadows, and confinement was anathema to his very being. The walls of the local jail were old, their security perhaps too complacent after years of dealing with lesser evils. His escape was audacious, shocking. It plunged the community back into a state of heightened terror. He was no longer just a suspected menace. He was a known killer, a fugitive loose in their midst. The manhunt that ensued was one of the largest the region had ever seen. Police, volunteers, even tracker dogs scoured the countryside. But Azazel had an advantage. He knew the land, he knew how to disappear, and he knew precisely where to go. Blood Hill. That brooding mass of rock and tangled woodland became his fortress, his sanctuary. He melted into its ancient, unwelcoming embrace, a place few dared to follow. On Blood Hill, Azazel was king. He moved through its treacherous paths with an eerie familiarity, a phantom in the mist. The hill, with its myriad caves, dense undergrowth, and forgotten trails, was the perfect hiding place. He became a legend whispered around terrified hearths. A man who could vanish into thin air, who could see in the dark, who was perhaps no longer entirely human. The hunt for him became a desperate, often fruitless endeavor. He would leave unsettling signs of his presence. A disturbed campsite, a stolen item from a nearby farm, just enough to remind them he was still out there watching. The dynamic shifted. The hunted, Azazel in his element on Blood Hill, effectively became the hunter once more. Those who searched for him felt his unseen eyes upon them, the unnerving sensation of being stalked. Fear was his greatest weapon, and he wielded it expertly. He was not merely evading capture, he was playing a deadly game, turning the tables on his pursuers. Blood Hill was no longer just a landmark, it was Azazel's domain, a place where the normal rules did not apply, and where the darkness he embodied seemed to find its truest, most terrifying expression. The pressure mounted not just on the authorities, but on one man in particular, Bruce. Section 6. Brothers Divided. The Inevitable Collision. Bruce Ridgway could no longer stand idly by. The escape of his brother, Azazel, had transformed simmering communal fear into raw, unadulterated panic. Oakhaven lived under a siege mentality. Doors bolted, children kept close. Bruce, a man of inherent decency and quiet courage, felt the weight of Azazel's crimes as if they were his own. He was his brother's keeper, in a way no one else could be. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, the twisted paths of Azazel's mind, the familiar terrain of Blood Hill where he now lurked. The authorities were hampered by procedure, by the sheer difficulty of the hunt. Bruce was driven by something more personal, more profound. A desperate need to end the nightmare. He knew Azazel. He knew the places on Blood Hill where his brother might seek refuge, the old haunts from their fractured boyhood, now perverted into lairs. While the police searched methodically, Bruce began his own solitary quest. It was not a hunt for justice in the legal sense, but a pursuit born of a deeper, more tragic necessity. He armed himself not just with a weapon, but with a grim resolve. He was not a lawman, nor a vigilante in the traditional sense. He was a brother, facing the horrifying task of confronting the monster his sibling had become. The townsfolk watched him, some with hope, others with pity, knowing the terrible burden he carried. The ascent of Blood Hill was, for Bruce, a journey into the heart of his family's darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, could be Azazel. The air grew colder. The familiar paths of his youth now seemed alien, menacing. He called out his brother's name, his voice swallowed by the oppressive silence of the woods. He knew this confrontation was inevitable. It had been brewing for years, since those first unsettling cruelties of their childhood. It was a tragedy foretold, a final, brutal act in a play penned by dysfunction and despair. The noble spirit of Bruce was pitted against the pure, unadulterated malice of Azazel. The confrontation, when it finally came, was not a dramatic shootout as some might imagine. It was something far more primal, more desperate. Deep within the shadowed heart of Blood Hill, near a forgotten cairn that local legend claimed was older than memory itself, the brothers met. Azazel, gaunt and feral from his time on the run, was more animal than man. Bruce, weary but resolute, stood his ground. Words were exchanged, not of reconciliation, but of bitter accusation and raw, unvarnished hatred from Azazel. The air crackled with a tension that was almost physical, the culmination of a lifetime of diverging paths leading to this single, terrible point. Section 7. The Reckoning on Blood Hill, a violent end. The final struggle on Blood Hill was brutal, desperate. It was not a battle of equals, for Azazel fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, devoid of reason or restraint, his eyes burning with a terrifying light. Bruce, though physically capable, fought with the heavy heart of a man forced into an unthinkable act. He sought to subdue, perhaps even to save some fragment of the brother he once knew, however faint. But Azazel was beyond saving. He was a whirlwind of violence, his only intent to destroy, to drag his brother down into the same abyss he inhabited. The ancient stones of the cairn bore silent witness to their grim ballet. Rain began to fall, a cold slanting torrent that mirrored the misery of the scene. Mud slicked the ground, making every movement treacherous. The sounds of their conflict guttural roars from Azazel, pained grunts from Bruce, were swallowed by the vast, indifferent wilderness of Blood Hill. It was a fight to the death, though perhaps only Azazel truly embraced that inevitability from the outset. Bruce defended himself, parrying the wild attacks, searching for an opening, a way to end this without succumbing to the savagery his brother embodied. But Azazel offered no such quarter. He was relentless, driven by a lifetime of perceived slights and a profound, consuming darkness. The precise details of Azazel's demise remain shrouded in the mists of Blood Hill and the conflicting, whispered accounts that followed. Some say Bruce, in a final act of desperate self-preservation and a grim sense of duty, was forced to strike a fatal blow. Others whisper that Azazel, in his frenzy, brought about his own end, perhaps a fall from a precipice or a misstep that turned his own violence against him. What is known is that when the storm finally broke and a search party, guided by a sixth sense or perhaps Bruce's own exhausted signal, found them, Azazel Gary Ridgway was dead. His reign of terror was over. Bruce was found alive, but barely. He was broken, physically and spiritually. He had faced the darkness, and, though he had survived, he was forever scarred by the encounter, by the terrible price of ending his brother's evil. He never spoke in detail of those final moments on Blood Hill. The silence he maintained only added to the grim legend. Oakhaven breathed a collective sigh of relief, yet it was a relief tinged with sorrow and a lingering unease. The monster was dead, but Blood Hill had claimed him, and the place itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The silence that fell upon the hill was not peaceful. It was watchful. Section 8, Spectral Whispers, The Haunting Takes Root. The death of Azazel Gary Ridgway did not cleanse Blood Hill. If anything, it seemed to tether his malevolent spirit more firmly to that forsaken place. Almost immediately the stories began. Locals, emboldened by his physical absence yet still wary, would speak of strange occurrences. Hikers who strayed too close to the cairn where he fell reported sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, even on the warmest of days. Others claimed to hear faint, guttural whispers carried on the wind, words indistinguishable, yet filled with an undeniable menace. The air itself felt charged, heavy with an unseen presence. Farmers with land bordering the hill reported livestock inexplicably agitated, refusing to graze near its slopes. Dogs would whine and cower if brought too close, their hackles raised at an invisible threat. More chillingly, some claimed to see a fleeting figure in the mists that so often cloaked Blood Hill's summit. A tall, gaunt shadow that moved with an unnatural fluidity, always vanishing before it could be clearly seen. The description, vague as it was, bore an unsettling resemblance to Azazel in his final feral days. The haunting of Blood Hill had begun not with a dramatic flourish, but with a creeping, insidious dread. The specific site of Azazel's demise became a focal point for these paranormal activities. No marker was placed there, no memorial save for the disturbed earth and the chilling tales. Yet people felt drawn to it, or perhaps warned away by an instinctual fear. Those who dared to visit spoke of an overwhelming sense of despair, of being watched by unseen eyes filled with hatred. Objects left behind, a dropped coin, a discarded wrapper, would sometimes be found moved, or would vanish entirely, only to reappear in unsettling locations days later. It was as if Azazel's spirit was still playing its cruel games. Bruce Ridgway, a recluse after the ordeal, was said to have never set foot on Blood Hill again. He lived out his days in quiet solitude, haunted by memories rather than spirits. But for the rest of Oakhaven, Azazel's presence was becoming a new, spectral reality. The legends of his life were slowly, chillingly, being replaced by the legends of his death and of what came after. The fear he inspired in life was potent, but the fear of his restless, vengeful spirit took on a different quality, more insidious, more pervasive, a constant, unnerving reminder of the evil that had walked among them and now lingered as an unquiet echo. Section 9. An Unquiet Grave, Azazel's Enduring Malevolence. Years have bled into decades since Azazel Gary Ridgway met his violent end on Blood Hill, yet his shadow stretches long and cold over Oakhaven. The hill itself remains a place of profound unease, a shunned landmark that locals speak of with a mixture of fear and grim fascination. The stories of his spectral presence have not faded with time. They have solidified, becoming an integral part of the local folklore. Azazel's unquiet grave is not a plot of earth, but the entirety of Blood Hill, every twisted tree and shadowed hollow a testament to his enduring malevolence. His evil, it seems, was too potent to simply dissipate. The eerie occurrences persist, evolving with each retelling but always retaining their core of chilling credibility. Hikers still report sudden icy gusts of wind on calm days, the feeling of being followed, and the faint, unmistakable scent of decay in places where no carcass lies. Some claim to hear a low mocking laughter echoing from the deeper woods, particularly as dusk settles. The most unnerving tales involve fleeting glimpses of a figure matching Azazel's description, sometimes seen standing motionless by the old cairn. sometimes moving with terrifying speed through the undergrowth, a dark blur against the twilight. He is the eternal warden of his own cursed domain. The contrast between the brothers, so stark in life, continues in legend. While Azazel's spirit is one of pure, unadulterated menace, some older tales, whispered less frequently, suggest that Bruce's noble spirit also lingers, not as a terrifying phantom, but as a faint protective presence, a sorrowful guardian trying to contain the darkness of his brother. These are hopeful whispers, however, often drowned out by the louder, more visceral fear of Azazel. The primary emotion Blood Hill evokes is dread, a direct legacy of its most infamous inhabitant. His evil was a stain that even death could not wash away. Blood Hill stands as a monument to a dark chapter, a constant reminder of the capacity for human depravity and the chilling possibility that some evils are too profound to ever truly die. Azazel Gary Ridgway is more than just a name from a tragic past. He is an active spectral threat, his dark legacy woven into the very soul of the landscape. The haunting is not merely a collection of ghost stories. It is the enduring presence of a twisted will, an unquiet spirit forever bound to the scene of its final terrible acts. And as long as Blood Hill looms, the chilling whispers of Azazel's name will continue to echo in the mists.